In this podcast, we're going to be looking at the usefulness of functionalist approaches in explaining crime. So, there are many different functionalist approaches, but they are all structural and believe that the law is equally enforced. They argue that crime and deviance can only be explained by looking at society's social structure, and they argue that crime is caused by society rather than the circumstance of the individual. Most functionalists believe that crime is functional and generally beneficial. One of these theories that believes that crime is functional for society is Durkheim. He argues that crime was rare in pre-industrial societies, as family and religion were powerful agencies of socialization and control, and crime only occurred due to an enemy. He believes that crime has four positive functions in a society. 1. To promote positive social change by highlighting inadequate social structure. For example, the suffragette movement highlighted gender inequalities. 2. Crime like terrorist attacks create public outrage which reinforces community solidarity against the offenders, such as the Paris attacks. 3. Pursuit, trial and punishment of criminals reassures people that society is functioning effectively while reminding them of acceptable social boundaries of behaviour because it reinforces consensual values. And 4. Minor crimes act as safety valves which prevents more serious crimes. Durkheim's view is useful because it demonstrates how crime can cause consensus and prevent enemy. However, Marxists argue that even if crime is functional, the laws aren't fair. For example, laws are made by the ruling class for the ruling class, such as property laws. And labelling theory is similar to Marxism, as they argue that laws don't reflect the will of the people, but protect the moral entrepreneurs. And also, left realists argue that Durkheim doesn't put the victim at the centre of the stage and he looks too much at the functions. So now we move on to Merton, who was the first person to give specific reasons of why people commit crime, and he also tightened up Durkheim's definition of enemy by arguing that it was not having the opportunity to be monetarily successful. Merton believed that the cause of crime lies in the relationship between the culture and the social structure of society, but most people do not break the law. He argued that those people at the bottom of society may experience a strain between their goals and their legitimate institutional means, as a chance of accessing these is blocked by those with economic and social advantages. This produces enemy, and individuals respond in various ways. You have conformity, which is the non-deviant, innovation, which explains monetary crime, which is largely committed by the working class, ritualism, which is when you get satisfaction from meaningless jobs, retreatism, which is when you drop out of society, and rebellion, which is the most extreme, and people rebel to replace goals by using violent methods. Young, who was a new criminologist and then was a left realist, used Merton's framework to demonstrate that the institutions in the UK and the media stressed the meritocratic ideal. He argued there was a contradiction between culture and the institutions that make up social structure, which fail to deliver material success for most people, so they turn to crime. Overall, Merton's view is useful because it takes a middle-range approach, unlike Durkheim, who took a macro approach. And also, Merton's view is useful because it explains monetary crime. However, Merton ignores the social agent of choice and utilitarian crime. And Merton can't explain deviance of a collective nature, as he looked at individual deviance. For example, he can't explain gang culture. Also, Merton doesn't explain antisocial behaviour, but functionalist subculturalists have addressed these issues. So functionalist subcultural theories, such as Albert Cohen's theory of status frustration, can be used to demonstrate how delinquency is caused by a strain between cultural goals and the institutional means of achieving them, and that young people want respect and to feel valued. So, here's the example of working class boys who are denied status at school, and then they leave school with few qualifications, so they are then denied status by wider society. The boys feel alienated and angry at the low status that schools and society allocate them, and so they experience status frustration. They respond by developing gangs who reverse the norms and values of the dominant culture and award one another on the basis of antisocial behaviour. Albert Cohen's view is useful because it explains collective deviance and non-monetary crimes such as vandalism. However, it assumes that the working class boys understand and want to achieve a degree of success, but they may not have these goals in the first place, as Willis found in his study of the lads. And Albert Cohen only talked about male delinquency, however, his study was written before female crime was studied. So overall, subcultural theory can be criticised by postmodernists like Ling, who argued that young males get involved with deviance as they like taking risks and being involved with edge work. And also Matza argues that we all potentially have subterranean values, and some of them are deviant values. It's just that some people are better at suppressing them than others. So in conclusion, the functionalist view is useful because it gives us insight into the criminal process. For example, how group activity in crime is not all bad, and it highlights the positive functions of crime. However, the functionalist analysis is too optimistic because it doesn't reflect the law of the people. Also, feminists would argue because they argue that they are gender blind and how females get treated unequally. The New Right would also argue that functionalists don't focus on the underclass who commit the most crime, and you could also finally conclude that crime is too complicated to be explained by just one theory.